At every level, the planet of Nakare-1011c has seen many Earthling species evolve and adapt to a new environment light years away from Earth. In just 5 million Parian years, many animals have adapted into a variety of strange and unique forms, and this series will be dedicated to providing a window to this world of unguided evolution and natural history. Welcome to the abandoned world of Parias. Last episode, we examined the harsh and vast Crimson Desert on the western side of Lucindo. This episode, however, will take us to a small island in the Rift Valley between Lucindo and Belcrake, the nearest continent. Isrenne is a small island, around 3/4 the size of Taiwan, and is a primarily rocky island, with a large extinct volcanic peak being the highest point on the island. When humanity abandoned the planet of Parias, what would become Isrenne was part of the supercontinent, but after the rapid ocean level rise and continental drift, this island became its own island, with an environmental upheaval emerging due to the heavy level of isolation. Isrenne, when looking at the continental shelf, appears to belong to the Belcrake plate. However, since the fauna of the island is mostly unique to the territory, and since Lucindo doesn't have any significant islands of its own, it will be covered in the Lucindan season of Parias. The climate on this small island is mild and tolerable, with warm, dry summers and cool, wet winters. Temperatures stay around 60 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, or 16 to 32 Celsius, year-round. Due to the mild conditions, the small size of the island has become the main problem affecting life that wants to find a home here, causing conditions to be radically different than the mainland. An example of the effects of island dwarfism can be seen in the dominant tree species on the island. The duly named dwarf oak is an oak species that has adapted to the small size of the island by shrinking in comparison to their ancestors. On Earth, they grew on the mainland at heights of over 18 meters, but on the island of Isrenne, 5 million years post-establishment on Parias, these trees grow no further than 12 meters. Due to the milder climate of Isrenne, the species has evolved a lessened cycle of estivation, only dropping their leaves at the end part of the dry season, around autumn time. Despite their smaller size, they are by far the largest native plant species on the island, and their acorns are an invaluable source of nutrients to the environment's food web. The dwarf oak is a key species for the survival of 2 epiphytic plants, using the large woody body of the oak for their own self-gain. The Isrennian tree bean is a large bean species that has descended from the black turtle bean and evolved to live on the trunks of dwarf oak trees. Being outcompeted by other plant species on the island, this small plant has adapted to survive by siphoning nutrients from oak trees and producing large plants and bean fruits. The body of the Isrennian tree bean has turned into a vine-coated mess, wrapping around low branches and roots alike. The flowers produced by this species are uniquely large, alongside others on the island, in order to attract more generalist birds to pollinate them. This island completely lacks specialist pollinators, and requires larger and more generalized species in order to reproduce. Another species that has adapted to be an epiphyte is the spiderweb ivy, a species that forms vast webs of connected plants in a single colony. A colony of this species could cover more than one tree, depending on how close the trees are to each other, as this species grows on higher branches compared to the Isrennian tree bean. To keep all the plants from falling off the tree, the spiderweb ivy has adapted hooks that connect to other members of the colony, keeping them and the host plant intact. Because of these hooks, They can often provide protection for small birds from confrontation with their avian predators. On the ground, one of the species that found dominance in taking over any creek or water body regions is the Isrenne moss, which have overgrown much of the undergrowth due to their lack of animal-assisted pollination required for their survival. They can be found on rocks, on the dirt, or anywhere on the island where enough moisture can be found. The moss is a clean, simple, and edible plant that humbly feeds the herbivores of the island. Another plant that has become the most iconic plant species on Isrenne is the uniquely flat and large Isrennian giant blanket flower. This species has adapted large flowers that attract pollinators and consumers alike to spread themselves across the island. Due to the lack of grass species, these flowers have overtaken the grass niche and coat the island in large orange flowers when the wet season comes in the winter. During most of the year, this perennial flower species has a bunch of grass-like leaves strewn all over, but bloom around the same time after a large winter storm. The flowers in this species grow big but not tall, which makes sense due to the fact that they will only shoot up and bloom in specific circumstances, allocating other resources to grow outward and not upward. All 5 of these plant species have become the majority of plant life on the island and are completely endemic to this part of the world alone. However, when looking at the other kingdoms and phyla, they may have some cross with some mainland species. The tuber oyster mushroom is a fungus species that is found quite commonly across Lucindo and Belcrake. This saprotrophic species is an essential decomposer, and its edible nature allows it to spread peacefully across the land with little opposition. This fungus is unique in that it, unlike other insular species, originated on Isrenne and found massive success outside its native homeland. Why is that? This is because the fungus has evolved a sclerotium, a hardened fungal mycelium that is used as a nutrient storage. This novel feature in this fungal lineage has 2 benefits that allowed this fungus to be very successful on Parias. One aspect that has affected their success is that this tuber-like organ acts as a storage unit of nutrients and water to keep it going no matter what conditions are thrown at the island. Another aspect that helps it be successful is that both the fruiting body and the pseudotuber are edible and nutrient-packed, which attract animals to eat it and get spores stuck on them in the process, spreading the food around the region after gaining their fill on Isrenne. Due to this, the species thrives across a very large region, despite its humble origins on a small island in between 2 continents. The plant and fungal life have evolved to thrive on the Isle of Isrenne, but are the base of the ecosystem for the animal life to mark their own unique niches on the small land, having to adapt to the extreme lack of space in comparison to the mainland. One of the species that are the exemplars of the effect of insular gigantism is the giant light beetle, a gargantuan species of firefly that has undergone an interesting evolutionary pathway to take advantage of multiple niches within a single lifespan. Laying eggs on carcasses and rotting material, this species specializes in eating carrion and other invertebrates as larvae. When they pupate and metamorphose into the adult stage, this species of giant beetle, capable of growing up to 15 centimeters, or half a foot long, eat fruits and acorns. Their gray bodies are covered in white and black speckles, which are unique to each individual specimen. When mating season happens in early summer, these large arthropods glow an orangish-red glow and spend days mating until exhausted. After mating season is over, these animals continue their lives whilst the next generation of fireflies grows wherever nutrition can be found. Another species of arthropod that lives on the island is the mailman fly, a detritivore that eats anything that most other animals find disgusting, with a preference for rotting fruit. Due to the reduced number of insectivores on the island, and more of a threat from giant light beetle larvae, these beetles have changed their parental strategy to survive. Having longer lifespans than their ancestral species, they evolved new parental strategies beyond laying eggs on a surface and abandoning them. When mailman fly maggots are almost ready to mature, the mother will bring them one at a time to a carcass or high-nutrient detritus item. When the maggots are delivered to the perfect conditions to grow into their adult stage, the female will leave and attempt to mate almost immediately afterwards. Whilst these species are specialized to the island environment, there are some other invertebrates that have presence on the mainland as well as Isrenne. These species likely rafted to the island from the westernmost point of Bell Creek to the nearest landmass. One species that rafted across the sea is the pirefoot snail, a small herbivore that has evolved eating toxic material to become extremely poisonous. Their bright shells are spotted with golden freckles and orangish-gray skin. Whilst being a recent addition to the island's roster of life, they haven't been very successful in comparison to mainland species. One factor to this is the genetic bottleneck that came from the small number of individuals that rafted to the island, being carried along by their toxicity alone. Another problem outside of inbreeding that has harmed the population of Iranian snails is their poison is less potent than the mainland species, causing them to be occasionally predated by more generalist predators. Despite these downsides, these snails have become hardy enough to eke out a living on the island. Another recent addition to the ecosystem of Isrenne is the winged fire ant, a species of fire ant that has spiny outgrowths on their backside that makes them sharp and intimidating. At some point, a few fertile queens made it across the sea to the island of Isrenne and have become the most successful invertebrates on the island by sheer numbers. These opportunistic, omnivorous, and adaptable ants adapted to the vacant niches of eusocial insects and have evolved highly aggressive swarm behavior as a method to attack small birds, other arthropods, and even baby mammals. A species of fish calls the freshwater creeks and waterways of Isrenne their home. The Isrenne fingerbiter is a Texas shiner descendant that has evolved to live in fresh and saltwater environments. During their juvenile life stage, they spend their time hiding in the kelp forests that surround the island. Adults of this species tend to live in freshwater environments instead, attacking anything in the water that they can get their big mouths on, from insects to plants to even small snakes. Another species that fingerbiters have to keep an eye out for is a species of frog that can also be found in the waterways and moist regions of the island environment. The Isrenne devil is a robust ambush predator and is yet another good example of insular gigantism, taking advantage of the relative lack of mainland predators and lower gravity of Parias to become one of the largest frog species in the whole region. This frog can fall prey to larger avian predators that frequent the island, but may often raid nests when given the chance. The only reptile that can be found on the island is the giant green snake, a snake that has survived when others couldn't. When islands break from a mainland environments can be uprooted, and many niches get wiped out easier than elsewhere. However, smaller and adaptable species are the most likely to survive and become insular specialists. This is true for the giant green snake, becoming larger than their ancestor and adapting to eat anything they can catch. They are great climbers and swimmers, and have a mixed diet of fish, crabs, and small birds. The mammals have made presence on the island of Isrenne as well. The dwarf spiral sheep is a fast-moving species that is an example of insular dwarfism. On the mainland, the species is larger and more diverse in numbers, but on the island the species has shrunk in size. This is due to the smaller amounts of resources on the island, alongside having to face large aerial predators. Despite being smaller than their mainland cousins, these animals are extremely fast, the fastest of all species on the island. These sheep have almost entirely lost their horns, being mere bumps on the males and absent on females. This species mates for life and holds their own small territory, and are very affectionate to their partner. The Iranian pronghorn is a pronghorn descendant with a longer neck and thinner body size. They resemble a giraffe's body plan, but rather shrunken down overall. This is due to competition from the other mammal species on the island. The Iranian pronghorn assumes the medium-sized herbivore niche on the island, browsing more often on tree bean and the lower branches of dwarf oak. Unlike the dwarf spinal sheep, this organism retains the ancestral territorial and sexual dimorphic behavior. Males can be quite aggressive, most often to other males, but will sometimes attack other animals that enter their domain, which can backfire terribly when messing with something larger than they are. While the other mammal species on the island have evolved to get smaller, one species has evolved a larger body size. The giant peccary is a gargantuan peccary species that has become the largest mammal and animal on the island. This stocky herbivore can be up to 2 meters tall and up to 3 meters long, grazing across the land and consuming whatever they come across. They have a sweet tooth for the tuber-like fungi that grow on the island. Groups in this species consist of 1 male and 1 to 4 females, alongside their young. Males in this species have to defend their mates from other males that wish to take control of the harem. Males will hit each other on their sides until one gets too weak and knocked over by the dominant specimen. As adults, these peccaries have practically nothing to fear but each other, but can fall prey to predators on the island, especially if they are juveniles. The most diverse group that can be found on the Isle of Isrenne are the birds, taking advantage over a variety of niches left vacant by other animals' extinction. Some of the birds are endemic to the island, living their entire lives on the small outcropping of rock. Others only visit and take advantage of the low-octane environment before flying away to other lands. One species that lives a lifestyle similar to the latter is the fruit moorduck, a primarily frugivorous bird species that eats fruits, seeds, and acorns. Acorns especially are a very common food source on Isrenne, causing these birds to use this location as a middle ground during their migratory patterns, which will be described in more detail in a future episode. In contrast to the migratory species, there are endemic birds that can be only found on the island. One of these is the Iranian giant Parias crake, or the Iranian crake, which is a flightless bird that has adapted to eat the numerous ants that can be found on the island, alongside snakes and eggs when given the chance. Both males and females of the species will defend their nests with high-pitched shrieks and aggressive behavior. Whilst being flightless, the Iranian crakes are great runners and swiftly run from predators when attacked. Another endemic flightless species is the giant doot, which thrives in the rivers and creeks of the island. Their large size and long necks make them great at consuming both aquatic and high vegetation, and also providing a level of protection against predatory birds that frequent the region for an easy meal. This species ultimately descended from the same ancestral duck species that the Iranian crake descends from. A small land goose also lives on the island. Typically, islands cause flightless birds to be larger than their mainland flighted relatives, but this is a unique anomaly that can be explained by two factors. The primary factor is competition from the other flightless birds on the island. The giant doot and the Iranian crake, respectively, take up the large browser and fast small herbivore niche, relegating this species to eating flowers, acorns, moss, and fallen fruits. Another factor is that this species is yet another rafter that showed up to the island recently, being already a flightless goose lineage from bellcrake. The apex predator of the island, and one of the most dangerous aerial threats in the region, is the giant shoebill. With a height of 1.6 meters and a wingspan of 3.5 meters, this bird is a true giant. The giant shoebill nears the maximum size a bird can reach on Parias, while retaining the ability to fly. Their massive thick bills and muscular neck allows this bird to crunch down hard on prey, either living or dead. Their bite force allows them to crack bones of small animals, which are their preferred prey. On Isrenne, their nesting grounds, they attack anything they can catch, even including juvenile giant peccaries. However, on the mainland on Lucindo or Bellcrake, the species is more of a scavenger. This species is relatively migratory, but typically makes nesting colonies on their home island on Isrenne. Recently, there have been nesting colonies on the mainland, but they appear to be less successful, being more prone to nest raids from small, opportunistic mammals. All of these animals form a complex yet fragile environment that is the island of Isrenne. These aren't the only species native to the island and the waters around it, but are the most notable. Tune in next episode as we move back to the mainland of Lucindo and examine the least diverse region on the entire continent, the Spinal Mountains. Thanks to you all for watching, and if you want to keep the series going, please share, like, and subscribe. This is all I could ever ask for right now, especially with the channel so small. These videos can take weeks or months to produce, so subscribing ensures small projects like these can have the strength to keep going and make this content easier to find for others like you. I would also like to thank the Parias Discord server, who helps make these videos possible with their artwork and ideas for life forms on Parias. If you want to join and contribute to the project, the link to the server is in the description and the pinned comment.